the talk in the mainstream media over the past 6 months has been that the potential for Russia to launch nukes on Europe or the West is elevated, and that we are in an even more dangerous situation than the Cold War, for example. But I think the simple fact that's being overlooked is that Russia is in no position to advance on the West, especially using nukes, mainly because of the fact that Russia has gotten much more than it bargained for in Ukraine, and a lot of that being because Ukraine has been supported by the West, especially the United States, in terms of, missile technology, even personnel, although that's not being admitted on mainstream channels, strategy, and Russia has gotten much more than it has bargained for. So the idea that Russia, for example, Vladimir Putin recently claiming that the idea or the concept that nukes could be used is something that is on the table, and that, quote unquote, he is not bluffing, is actually a bluff. Because again, any nuclear strike would have to have the threat of personnel and the ability to use kinetic warfare to follow up that strike. Again, Russia is not in that position. They are already stretched thin. The attempt now by Russia, at least what is being purported and shown on mainstream news channels, is that Russia is trying to get access to 300,000 reserves, which a lot of people are fleeing the country. It's difficult for them to even get 300,000 reserves, which then would lead one to question how many Russians have died so far in this conflict with Ukraine. The estimated number of Ukrainians killed so far, killed in action, is from 24 to 36,000 Ukrainians. How many Russians? And when you have a number like that, the number of wounded and incapacitated is from 2 to 3 times that. So it leads one to ask how legitimate is a claim that Putin is going to launch nukes on the West. It's not. It's not. And the good news about that is that it can allow the world to focus on the issues at hand, because that is indeed a bluff. Saying, as he said, that he's not bluffing, that nuclear strikes are on the table, it is a bluff. So that's the good news. But the bad news is that in the longer term, that is actually an understatement, because when Putin refers to these nuclear strikes, he's talking about Europe. In the long term, not only are nuclear strikes on the table, they're on the table not just in Europe, but against the main threats to Russian and actually Chinese hegemony, the U.S. And that's what people don't recognize at this stage, because everybody's attention is fixed on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. But that demonstrates a lack of understanding of history, because Hitler was invading countries and setting up the regime that would then create a real powerhouse of industrial and military capability a decade before anything was perceived or seen on the world stage, right? one must look at the setup ahead of time, right? And when we look at the sanctions that were put on Russia at the beginning of this new war or conflict, the thing that's not being talked about is the strengthening of the alliance between Russia and China. China creating contracts with Russia where the oil was paid for before it was even shipped, which is not how China normally operated, which was not how China did business in terms of purchasing oil. Oil was paid for on delivery, yet all of a sudden they were paying for it ahead of time from Russia. So there was obviously this understanding, and it's interesting to watch how China has gone from, either good and then after the pandemic to neutral, to now the narrative is shifting that China is now bad. So again, one must ask, well, what is this narrative that's being set up? And the narrative that is being set up is that China and Russia are against the West, and there's ultimately a conflict that's going to come out of this, but it's not going to be a conflict like Iraq or Afghanistan where it was, we send billions of dollars of taxpayer monies overseas and we don't see much of it. This is something that we're talking about world powers that the U.S. has actually helped to create over the past 20 to 30 years. And Russia, again, people think that communism fell in Russia. No, that was a phony fall of the Soviet Union. And we're really reaching a critical point now in world history, because there's the bluff in the present of nukes being used, which again is a bluff. But then there's where it actually goes in the long term, which may not be a bluff. So it definitely is worth it to look at what is going on the world stage and try to get an understanding of where it goes. And that is something to pay attention to and try to ascertain, where does it actually go. And that's kind of the point of making these videos, and I will see you soon in the next video.